At that time, there was a team struggling hard against very dangerous squirrels. The information in front of them confused them and made it difficult to survive the battle. Anyone who saw this would think it was a game, but no, this was their new reality. To understand what was happening, let's go back a bit in time. The main character, Shiro, didn't know when he was brought to this world. After wandering around, he realized this was the world of Akiba. Many others were also brought here, and this was the game world they once played. The status screen was still functioning well, but some features were not. He saw the friend list was still active and noticed many friends were also brought here. He found his friend Sugu's name and immediately called him. They both agreed to meet under a big tree. This was the first time they saw each other's real faces, and Sugu always called Shiro Black Glasses because his appearance looked dangerous. It had been quite a while since they last entered the game, and they didn't understand how this could happen. Today was supposed to be the day the developer released a new update. They couldn't remember what happened before installing the update, and upon realizing it, they were already here. It felt so real that this wasn't a dream. It seemed, for now, they needed to adapt and gather information because they couldn't return to the real world yet. Shiro noticed that everything here still resembled the game they used to play, so they shouldn't venture out as there might be many monsters out there. The two of them then talked about various things that men usually discuss. Suddenly, Shiro stumbled. He explained that in real life he was shorter than here, making it a bit difficult to move. Shiro then accidentally met an old friend from their team, Akatsuki, a ninja assassin. When they met, Akatsuki asked for a bottle of potion to change her appearance from Shiro because she was a woman and wanted to change her appearance. Shiro had always thought Akatsuki played as an assassin, so he remained silent. However, it turned out Akatsuki was a woman. After drinking the potion given by Shiro, Akatsuki began to transform and became a woman matching her real gender. That night, Sugu asked why Akatsuki hadn't created a female character from the start, and she replied that since it was a game, she felt free. But now, because this had become a reality, she had to change it to feel more comfortable. Akatsuki felt indebted to Shiro, so she wanted Shiro to set conditions to repay her debt. Shiro didn't want to accept, but Akatsuki didn't like receiving help from others without repaying it. Sugu kept making lewd comments, so he received a few punches from Akatsuki. Finally, Sugu decided to invite Akatsuki to join their team as a form of repayment. Seeing that Shiro didn't mind, Akatsuki decided to follow Shiro as a sign of her devotion. The next morning, they all went to the market to look for food. They saw that this place seemed busier with NPCs than before. The food looked delicious, but when eaten, it tasted bland and all the food tasted the same like wet biscuits. The orange juice tasted like plain water. Suddenly, someone named Marie called out to Shiro. Shiro led his team to the Crescent Moon Alliance territory. There, he reunited with Marie, his very kind sister. Seeing Shiro, Marie immediately hugged him tightly. Shiro's team members also felt this warmth. Shortly after, Henry, who looked more serious than Marie, also arrived. However, he too succumbed to Akatsuki's sweet charm. The reason they came was to share information. They had gathered some basic information about this place. First, most teleportation portals were unusable, and the situation of being stuck in the game was happening across servers in all regions. Most guild members had gathered and were actively recruiting new members. After the update, the game was also different from the one they used to play. Marie wanted to invite Shiro to her guild, but he declined and returned with his two friends. Marie told her team that Shiro used to be the tactical advisor of a big team, but that team never formed a guild despite often participating in special guild events. Now, that team had disbanded. Shiro was currently wondering what would happen if they died here. In the game, if they died, they would return to the temple, but now no one dared to try it. That night, Shiro took his two friends to fight monsters because they had reached the highest level, so they still had confidence. However, when facing a group of squirrels, they were still not skilled in fighting because they were used to using commands on the status screen. But Akatsuki fought very agilely, so Shiro understood and told Sugu to fight with actions, not using commands. Now, Shiro understood this world better. Once a famous game worldwide brought hundreds of thousands of its players directly into the game, this event became known as the Great Disaster. The next morning, someone who died fighting monsters was revived at the temple, so it seemed in this world, death was not the end. Shiro's team was now more accustomed to the battle mechanisms in this world. But being accustomed was not enough, they needed to train more to become more proficient. That night, Akatsuki asked for permission to leave early because she wanted to practice some typical ninja techniques, such as seeing in the dark and moving silently. This forest was very suitable for practicing those skills. Shiro decided to use light magic so they could see the path and help Akatsuki find their location more easily. The reason their team had to practice fighting skills was because, in this area, large guilds were expanding their power and oppressing smaller guilds. In the city, battles couldn't be fought because the guards would intervene, so players farming levels individually or in small groups often became targets of attacks from large guilds to rob money and equipment. Of course, such players were despised by all other players. While walking and thinking, Sugu told Shiro to relax because Shiro looked tense. Shortly after, they reunited with Akatsuki. She reported that there were no monsters ahead, but as they approached a hospital, Shiro saw someone moving quickly. Sugu was immediately hit by leg binding magic, but Shiro promptly freed him. Shiro saw there were 4 people in front of them, and they seemed to be players robbing other players. They told Shiro to leave his belongings and go. Shiro would leave his belongings only if he was weaker than them, but not in this situation. Shiro then placed Sugu in front to withstand the attack. A female assassin tried to attack Shiro but was immediately bound. They saw Shiro as the main target that needed to be eliminated, so they switched to Shiro. However, Sugu used provocation magic to force them to attack him. They planned to eliminate Sugu with a combined attack, but Shiro used magic to bind them back. This magic didn't cause much damage, but Shiro also used another spell to reduce their defense and enhance Sugu's attack. If Sugu broke all the bindings, they would surely lose. They called for the healer's help, but their healer had been put to sleep by Shiro from the start. A female assassin tried to attack Shiro again, but this opened a gap for Sugu to strike. The group leader called 2 mages from the back to attack, but they had already been taken down by Akatsuki without showing her face. Shiro realized there were people behind them because Sugu was hit by magic initially, but the 4 visible people didn't include a mage. The small spell Shiro cast was just to distract them. In the battle, their leader was left behind and begged for mercy, but he attempted to betray them, so Akatsuki gave him a single strike that killed him instantly. Sugu didn't understand why this group had to fight so senselessly. Perhaps they had nothing else to do in this game. Honestly, Shiro also didn't know what to do now. Food tasted bland, their levels were capped, and most peaceful people stayed in the city living lazy days. Even Shiro didn't know what to do now. Upon returning to the guild, Marie told him that her members were attacked by other players and were being helped by a kind person. Marie needed to go pick them up, so she would take 6 people and ask Shiro to take care of the guild in the meantime. But Shiro knew the trip would take nearly a month, and if Marie's group left, they wouldn't be able to fend off other evil players. Shiro hesitated to help Marie because he knew it would be awkward, but in the end, he decided his group would go to pick up the person for her. The next day, Shiro's group officially set off. They used a whistle to summon horses, and after a short journey, Shiro took out a map. After reorganizing, Sugu told Shiro he didn't need to feel awkward because this was something they needed to do in this world. Shiro and Sugu then used another whistle to summon large hawks, items only possessed by those who had been in Shiro's large team. They then rode the hawks, and Akatsuki experienced the impressive sensation of flying high for the first time. After a 3-day journey, Shiro's group arrived at the labyrinth on a mission to pick up a girl. The reason they couldn't keep using the hawks was that they could only ride them for 4 hours a day, but those 4 hours were equivalent to 2 weeks of travel by horse. They stopped at a mountain to go through the labyrinth because dragons outside would attack them if they flew. Traveling on the ground wasn't safe either, so they chose this underground labyrinth. This place was old and had rat monsters of low level who knew not to attack them. However, if cornered, they would fight back. Seeing the path ahead overrun by rats, the group chose another route to avoid battles as much as possible. During a break, Akatsuki scouted the next floor and reported to Shiro. Sugu remained frustrated with the bland food. They couldn't change the taste even when cooked by a chef, but the spices in this world had a distinctive flavor they could sprinkle on the food to make it less bland. Suddenly, Marie contacted them, surprised that they had come this far. The girl they were looking for could already communicate with Marie, and Marie said the girl was hiding with the person who saved her. The girl they were looking for was Sira, who was currently in a city working at her rescuer's house, a cat person named Nyanta. The city was full of evil players who liked to bully NPCs. Sira would soon leave that place because Shiro's group was expected to arrive in a few days. Shiro didn't tell Marie about the hawks, and Marie fully trusted Shiro. However, she was curious why Shiro hadn't joined any guild. Marie then attended a guild leader meeting, where only 60% were present because the rest refused to return. Shiro's group reached a nearly collapsed bridge. Shiro pushed Akatsuki to avoid falling, but he fell himself. He dreamed of the early days of playing the game when he was completely alone and figuring everything out by himself. His knowledge made him known to many who asked for help. Although sometimes feels annoyed, he eventually found the team he needed, including Sugu. Shiro regained consciousness and found himself saved by Akatsuki and Sugu. They continued their journey, and Akatsuki commented on Shiro's map skills. Shiro explained that he was a college graduate programmer, surprising Akatsuki since they were the same age. They encountered a large monster as part of a new update. Despite its size, it was mid-level, so they could handle it. Sugu started with provocation, Akatsuki attacked from behind, and Shiro used magic to weaken the boss and strengthen Akatsuki's attacks. They defeated the boss and found the exit. Seeing the sunset made Shiro realize this was the new thing he was looking for. It was their first trophy since playing this game. Meanwhile, a group of evil players was robbing NPCs. Their leader ordered them to find Sira and Nayanta immediately. Shiro's group finally arrived in the city where Sira was hiding. They heard about the evil guild and needed to enter the city to pick up Sira because if Sira went out, she would likely be found and it could be dangerous. Akatsuki sneaked in first, while Shiro and Sugu entered the city. They were soon spotted by the leader and his men, but they didn't act immediately. Shiro reached the meeting point and met Sira, surprised that Nayanta was his former team captain. They trusted each other, believing the plan would succeed. Sira asked if Nayanta would join, and he agreed because he had no reason to stay. Knowing Sugu was also joining made Nayanta more assured. They left boldly, knowing it was dangerous. As long as they were in the city, they couldn't be attacked, but they still escorted Sira out of the city. The leader and his men waited outside. Shiro asked if Nayanta could handle the leader alone, and he was confident. Shiro challenged the strongest to speak, and Nayanta taunted the leader, who eventually accepted the challenge. The leader had a warrior class character using fast attacks with short cooldowns to give the opponent no time to counter. Although Nayanta had less health, his speed and composure remained undisturbed because his class character used two swords and could continuously apply negative effects to the opponent. The leader soon found himself at a disadvantage, cheating by calling his friends to heal him. They then planned to gang up on Nayanta, but Sugu suddenly appeared and provoked them all. However, Sugu soon ran out of health due to their attacks. Then, Shiro asked Sira to use her healing ability on Sugu and Nayanta, focusing mainly on Nayanta. Nayanta was then kicked, and Sugu had to use a skill that made him invulnerable to all damage for 10 seconds, which could only be used every 10 minutes. The enemies thought Sugu was done, so he used his trump card. But when Sugu ran out of energy, Nayanta jumped towards Shiro. As he dodged, Shiro's attack bound the enemy leader, and Nayanta only needed to break the thorns to reduce the leader's health to 1. Akatsuki had already finished the enemies and mages at the back, not understanding why the leader's health evaporated so quickly. She suspected Shiro had used his attack twice, with a 15-second cooldown that coincided with the enemy leader's cooldown time. They understood each other so well that they could work together this effectively. Shiro gave the enemy leader a chance to retreat, leaving 1 health point as a sign, but he remained stubborn. Sira then gave a strike that made him flee. The enemy leader swore revenge on Shiro. The three then called the giant hawks and left immediately. Akatsuki felt a bit sad because she couldn't coordinate as well as Shiro's group. Shiro told them more about NPCs, who were previously just programmed characters but have developed human-like personalities since the Great Disaster. On the way home, Sira informed Marie that they managed to escape and were on their way back. Feeling safe now, Sira cried and thanked everyone. Since it was already night, they decided to set up tents and rest. As Shiro's group set up tents, Sira and Nayanta went to gather wood. Nayanta encountered a deer and decided to showcase his skills. That night, when everyone complained about the food, Sugu smelled meat. They found Nayanta grilling meat. Initially, they thought it was bland, but it turned out to be the first time they tasted delicious food in this world. Shiro's group ate heartily and asked for seconds. Sira saw Nayanta as a mother bird feeding her chicks. Nayanta taught them the proper way to cook. Previously, they only took ingredients and cooked through the status screen, but now they had to cook directly to make it taste good. Shiro's group had tried before, but the ingredients turned black. Nayanta thought they hadn't learned enough as cooks. Shiro felt there was still much to learn. Akatsuki then introduced herself to Nayanta and Sira. Sira felt guilty for being weak and relying too much on Shiro's group. Sira asked about the relationship between Shiro and Nayanta. They admitted they were once in a group called the Tea Party of Adventurers. They didn't have much in common but enjoyed doing difficult missions together. Akatsuki felt less capable of working well together like Shiro and his old friends. They then realized that Sira seemed to like mature men like Nayanta. They guessed Sira was about the age of a middle school student. Shiro and Sugu remembered that their group also had a pair of twins of that age who often followed Shiro to ask about the game. Shiro used the temporary level down mechanism to play with them. He saw their names still on the list and was sure they might be confused and scared. Shiro saw they were in a guild and hoped they were okay. The next day, their group got caught in the rain and sought shelter in a nearby village. Nayanta noticed that Shiro still hadn't joined a guild. Nayanta had once joined a guild of cat characters who liked to bask in the sun. However, the guild disbanded because of a storm. They found a house, and the village chief welcomed them, sheltering them. Sugu felt happy with the soft straw, while Nayanta and Sira looked for a fireplace to cook. The village chief's 2 grandchildren were excited to see Akatsuki, a ninja. They heard stories that this village was once hit by a snowstorm, losing their father and a sick mother in the mountains. Sugu realized NPCs were now like humans. Players were the most different because they could come back to life. Previously, they hadn't realized the significance of NPCs. Sira and Nayanta returned with food ingredients, and they made a cake that the NPCs had never tried before. Meanwhile, a group of adventurers returned from a mostly failed mission with many casualties back to the temple. They were angry at the overly strong leader who only attracted powerful monsters without a clear strategy. This group was where the twins had joined, feeling exploited by the stronger members. The younger twin missed Shiro dearly, hearing his voice but not daring to approach. Shiro explained that guilds offered many benefits like shared storage, private communication, and guild houses. After returning, Nyanta taught cooking to Marie's group and celebrated Sira's return. Henry told Marie to keep the cooking secret at Shiro's request. That night, while everyone slept, Shiro and Marie talked. Marie thanked Shiro for all his help. Shiro asked if there had been any problems while he was away. Marie explained there hadn't been many robberies and everything was safe, but the atmosphere was tenser due to competition. Marie's guild had less than 30 members, with some at the highest levels, while the largest guild had over 15 members, mostly at the highest levels. The competition led to strong guilds dominating hunting areas, even though there were rules against fighting while hunting. Shiro felt this situation created a significant barrier between players. However, they couldn't impose rules or moral standards on everyone. He had gathered many small guilds to share ways to overcome these barriers, but each guild had different opinions and no one was willing to compromise, so no agreement was reached. Additionally, some guilds targeted the new level cap in the latest update, but for high-level players to gain experience, they also had to fight high-level monsters. As a result, they used a trick with experience bottles. Experience bottles allowed users to get certain buffs and double the experience gained within a certain time, but the bottles were only given free daily to players below level 30. So, a guild would accept players below level 30 and take their experience bottles to resell to the large guilds that needed them. Shiro then went for a walk to think. He didn't know what to do in this situation. An old colleague suggested he try to solve this problem, but he didn't know what to do since he had never joined a guild before. He didn't like joining guilds because they were only interested in his veteran status. Suddenly, Nyanta came and saw that he was still dissatisfied with joining a guild. He knew that the reasons he thought of only proved he was arrogant, but he couldn't deny that the guild mechanism changed people. However, nothing remained unchanged in this world. Denying that reality was like denying his existence. Their previous team was also formed by the joint efforts of everyone, so treasures should be something earned together. Hearing the captain's explanation, he understood that everyone had long been by his side, waiting for him to change his view on guilds. He then contacted his twin sister, Minori. He knew her current situation, so he wanted her to confirm. Minori was very moved when she met Shiro again. He promised he would come soon to save the twins, so she should stay calm. The next day, he met Sugu and Akatsuki again and decided to ask for their help. He then returned to Marie's guild to ask for their help in rescuing the twins. Their guild still owed him, so they would help and also drive out the guilds that took experience bottles from new players. He decided to clean up this city because it was now run in a very petty and dirty way. It used to be the largest city on the server, but now it was very weak. They wanted to know his plan so they could help. First, he needed 5 million gold coins. Hearing that, everyone was shocked. However, what he needed most of all was everyone's goodwill. The more people supported him, the greater the chance of success. So, he asked for their help once again because he had now formed his guild called Log Horizon. Regarding the currency in this world, a simple meal only cost 5 gold coins, staying at an inn was 10 coins, and it took 35 coins for daily living. Just killing 6 goblins was enough. Therefore, the 5 million gold coins Shiro needed was enormous. Marie's guild had at most 60,000 gold coins, but he had a special plan for that money. However, they also had ways to make money. Marie's guild members and Sugu were currently capturing wild boars alive because killing them only yielded 2 kilograms of meat, but capturing them alive for processing would yield more. Nyanta had trained more cooks for Marie's guild, while Marie hadn't left her room for 3 days due to a pile of documents. Henry kept adding documents, and Shiro also brought more for her to work on. Henry saw Shiro was very determined in the upcoming plan because he liked being with Akatsuki. So, just by using Akatsuki as bait, Henry would work. Akatsuki was monitoring the experienced bottle sellers and suddenly felt a chill. Sugu and 2 young men had just brought back some wild animals, and Marie thanked them. However, the amount was still insufficient, so they went back to hunting. That night, Marie saw a pile of leftover documents and screamed. She was now completely afraid of people with glasses because they were all dangerous. Based on Henry's memory, we know he used to be an accountant in the real world, so Shiro asked him to help create a new mechanism for generating money because hunting monsters here wasn't enough. When he realized there was another way, Henry said that the target of 5 million gold coins might be achievable. Sugu then brought a cake for Marie, who kept complaining about her job. He thanked Marie for supporting Shiro's plan and said that the plan would start the next day. The following day, Marie and the girls opened a food shop to attract players to come and eat. They thought the food would taste bland like everything else, and even though it smelled good, they didn't expect much. However, after tasting it, They were moved because they could once again experience the taste of the real world here. The news began to spread throughout the city. Many people came to buy food, and production couldn't keep up with demand. Everyone was busy, and the news spread by word of mouth, with more and more people finding out. After a few days, they had collected more than 40,000 gold coins. However, at this rate, to reach 5 million gold coins, they would need 8 months, which wouldn't be enough to carry out the plan. If they had enough labor, they could serve up to 10,000 people a day, but their current labor force was only sufficient for 1,000 people. However, money was not the core of the plan this time. After finishing work, Henry looked for Akatsuki to relax. Akatsuki couldn't escape because this was the guild area, and she didn't know the paths or restrictions set there. She was forced to wear cute clothes and stand in front of everyone, feeling very embarrassed. Marie didn't know where the green-haired young man was, but Sugu said he hadn't returned yet. Just then, he brought a boar boss back to the guild. He then collapsed from exhaustion and fell asleep. Nyanto was very disappointed when he had to inform them that the giant boar meat couldn't be cooked because it smelled too pungent. Shiro then told Minori that all preparations were complete, so she had to hold on a little longer. Shiro then went with Nyanto to look at some houses in the city that could now be bought, but the prices were very high. They then met an old friend named Sujiro, who had formed his guild to be with people after the great disaster. He thought Shiro hated him because he had invited him in the guild, but he refused. He explained his reasons and how his views had changed. Now he needed Sujiro's help. Sujiro admitted that this city now felt like an invisible prison. Hearing that Shiro had a way to deal with it, Sujiro agreed because he didn't want to waste Shiro's precious time. He knew Shiro always had great plans he didn't understand, so there was no need for further explanation. Sujiro's first task was to help sell food because he was also attractive to the girls. Shiro felt it was now time to move on to the second step of the plan. The next day, Marie and Henry met a young man named Jason, who had previously played with Marie, but since they each had their guild, they rarely met. Jason had a guild that also functioned as a trade guild with 700 members. Marie needed help buying food supplies. Jason knew this, so he tried to pressure the price. Marie had been told by Shiro that if she encountered difficulty, just smile and let Henry handle the rest. Henry noticed that Marie was almost exhausted, so he gave Jason a price and said if he needed time to think, go ahead because they would meet 2 more trade guilds for the upcoming plan. Jason wanted more information about this business, so he agreed to the price given by Marie's guild for the supplies. Meanwhile, Minori was still being treated unfairly. Seeing this world as a bad place on the day of the great disaster, she didn't know what to do besides sit and cry, waiting for someone to come and save her. However, her brother, Gia, accepted the reality. Gia became her support because the boy seemed very happy experiencing new things. They received experience bottles every day, which made Gia want to try fighting monsters, and Minji also became braver thanks to her brother. But they were soon attacked by other players and lost everything. That's when they both remembered that important items should be stored in the bank, as Shiro had taught them. When they needed a place to take shelter, they both encountered the name of this extortionist guild. Minji felt jealous of Shiro because he could take over the world for himself, while Minji could only cry because of her helplessness. Therefore, Minji felt she was not worthy of being saved by Shiro. Meanwhile, Marie and Henry had now added 2 more trade guild owners. One owner was somewhat insensitive, while the other had a brain like Shiro but wasn't as smart. Shiro informed them that they shouldn't share cooking recipes before reaching an agreement, but they still had the upper hand because cooking recipes were tempting bait that everyone wanted. They had the right to disclose or keep information secret but shouldn't lie. Henry informed them that his guild was planning a major move that required their help, and the leader of the operation was Shiro. Hearing Shiro's name, everyone knew how great he was, making Henry's words carry more weight, and their requirement was 5 million gold coins. Everyone thought 5 million was the cost needed for a high-level mission from this expansion. Marie gave them a taste of pudding made from high-level monster ingredients, so they knew that to make delicious food, high-quality ingredients were needed, and the profits would not be small. After deducting costs, she needed another 45 million gold coins. If only one guild provided it, the balance of power would be too tilted to one side, so she asked to meet all 3 to divide each guild contributing 1 million gold coins. But the insensitive uncle was willing to pay it all to get the biggest profit, making the other 2 parties have to contribute as well. Meanwhile, the twin siblings knew they would be saved by Shiro, but Minji felt too pathetic and unworthy of being helped by Shiro. Gia, on the other hand, felt Shiro was too great, so he wanted to be like Shiro rather than continue relying on him. Their 2 sisters had returned and were very tired. Shiro's team brought food for them and informed them that Shiro had prepared the next step. Marie's and Shiro's guilds then sent invitations to major guilds across the country to attend a meeting. If only Marie invited them, they might not have cared, but because it was Shiro, they postponed their work to come. Shiro then called the twin siblings to inform them of the next plan. Minji decided to change for her brother and follow Shiro. The meeting was about to officially begin. In the game, guilds were usually divided into two types: guilds that focused on combat, mostly filled with high-level players, and guilds that focused on trade and support, which were more numerous. This meeting gathered all the leaders of the major guilds. Shiro started the meeting, and everyone still remembered him. Shiro revealed that the plan to connect small guilds had almost failed because everyone only cared about personal gain. So, everyone thought this meeting was the same as before, but Shiro immediately said that this was to improve the situation in this big city. However, one combat guild withdrew because they were only focused on fighting monsters and occasionally returning here to sell goods, so they didn't care about this situation. Shiro had anticipated the withdrawal of this combat guild from the meeting. Sira asked about Akatsuki and Sugu. Shiro had given them another task: the children who were being extorted for experience points every day should escape when they had the chance. Outside the guild hall door, Akatsuki would be there to welcome them. If they encountered trouble and died, Sugu would be waiting at the temple to await their resurrection and escort them away. So, their basic task was simply to run out. Back to Shiro, he mentioned that currently there were only 11 guilds at the round table, and he wanted to invite them to the round table guild. The 4 strongest combat guilds were chosen, 3 trading guilds were selected because of their strength, and the rest represented other players and smaller guilds. Shiro was only proposing and organizing this meeting because his guild only had 4 members, so it wasn't enough to be a member. Now, on to the main issue. Shiro had a way to improve security in this city. He immediately discussed the recent extortion of experience points by some guilds. Perhaps it didn't break the game rules, but essentially this game had no rules. The ban on fighting in the city was only due to the fear of guards coming to intervene, so it was just a game mechanic, not a rule. Rules are something made by humans and acknowledged by others. Shiro gave an example of the city where they rescued Sira as an example of disorder there. Shiro's words made everyone start to waver, but it was still not enough to reach an agreement. However, they all acknowledged that even if Shiro set the rules, if someone didn't recognize them, what would happen? What if their large combat guilds didn't accept the rules? Shiro decided to take preventive measures. He bought this guild headquarters building, so now Shiro controlled access. If they wanted to return to the guild headquarters, they had to pass through this place. The guild bank was also here, so this place was very important. Shiro had the right to prevent anyone in this city from accessing their bank accounts. Therefore, people called Shiro a demon. The nickname Dark Glasses was very fitting for Shiro. 2 twin siblings started fighting the extortionists to escape from the guild. They met Akatsuki's group outside, who informed Shiro that the plan had begun. Others saw Shiro threatening them, but rules were made to enforce discipline. Where did he get this place? From the 5 million gold coins provided by 3 trading guilds. They also got a cake recipe in return. Initially, they didn't intend to fight Shiro. At that time, the remaining twin had not yet exited the door and was intercepted by the extortionists. They used magic that drastically reduced the twins' blood. Ninji created a shield, but it didn't last long. Jia pulled his sister to run quickly outside. Inside, the door could no longer be opened because Shiro had blacklisted them. The guild leader managed to get out and capture him. Although he couldn't use magic, he could use his strength to finish off Jia. At that moment, Akatsuki came and informed Shiro that there was one person left out, so Shiro blacklisted him. He was then kicked out of the guild headquarters and captured by Sugu outside. Akatsuki then took the 2 twins to a safe place to clean up. Shiro now had a voice in front of the council, and he set 2 criteria to change this city. Hearing that the escape was complete, he smiled. But a red-haired youth from the combat guild angrily demanded that Shiro reveal his guild's plans. A week after the meeting, the entire city had almost transformed and was more vibrant than before. Back at the meeting, Shiro and Marie announced that the way to cook delicious food was to have someone with the skill of a chef cook it directly. At this time, the trade associations have joined forces to create steam engine technology that had never existed in the game before. This means they can now race to invent new things with their own hands instead of using outdated commands as before. Shiro's initiative will give players motivation and goals to strive for, as most players now feel bored due to a lack of activities. Encouraging development will give people a purpose to earn money and enjoy life. Not only will the trade associations benefit, but making money by killing monsters will also be increasingly promoted and advantageous for associations that focus more on combat. Regarding the law, Shiro wants to establish a ban on hitting or bullying low-level players in the hunting areas around the city. Concerning human rights, he wants to allow players the freedom to join or leave any guild they want, as well as establish a ban on detention or oppression that also applies to NPCs. Since NPCs are now similar to real humans, they are also directly involved in players' lives and are native inhabitants of this world. If they continue to oppress NPCs, there will surely come a time when NPCs rise against the players. The trade associations have simultaneously joined the Round Table Association after that day. The guild leaders announced the contents of the meeting and the cooking formula. Whenever someone wants to enter the guild hall, they have to pay 1 gold coin as tax. The group that had detained and robbed low-level players had been imprisoned in the guild hall for a long time, so they escaped using teleportation commands or stabbing each other to reincarnate at the temple. They disbanded the guild and left the city. The rescued children joined Marie's guild, so she had to move to a larger place. Shiro's group moved to a new house, and Gassen came to tell Shiro that he would hire NPCs to work. However, at this time, he and another guild leader realized that NPCs had recently become aware and cautious of them, indicating that NPCs had begun to take actions that needed to be watched. Marie and Henry then brought gifts to celebrate Shiro's new house. Sojo and an old team member, Nazuna, also came to congratulate them. This place had been renovated by the insensitive older brother from the large guild, and previously, the leader of the Black Sword Guild had also come to clean this place. After the guests left, Shiro asked about the twins' condition. Marie only said they were fine and then left. Nyan went out to buy groceries to make curry. Shiro's group was very excited about the curry. Shiro felt grateful to see his 2 friends who had been with him from the start. Nyan returned with the twins who expressed their desire to join Shiro's guild. While Shiro was still confused, Nyan reminded him that he was a leader, so he decided to accept the twins into the guild. All the guild members then sat under the stars to eat curry and enjoy the fruits of their labor, making Shiro's emotions swell. In the NPC Kingdom, also known in the story as the People of the Land, the king heard news that adventurers and players had formed a round-table conference, so he took note of this. Meanwhile, there were 2 people of the land who were hunting. They did not trust the adventurers because they believed the adventurers only knew how to kill without purpose. As they were about to shoot a deer, they saw black clouds approaching, signaling impending danger. In the city, development was evident, with everyone finding ways to trade and grow their businesses. Sugu and Akatsuki were busy training the twins, while Shiro tried to use his power to develop contracts or similar things. Nyan asked Shiro to take a break and go on vacation. Suddenly, Henry called Shiro for help with some issues. It turned out Marie was on strike because she wanted to go play and not keep working. Seeing Marie continuously sulking, Shiro got the idea to hold a training trip for players under level 40. This way, they could have fun while still considering it as work. After a discussion, they decided to go. Nyan, of course, joined as a coach. That night, the twins were determined to change and become stronger to prove that Shiro was not wrong in deciding to save them. Although it was called training, Marie and Henry were very enthusiastic about preparing for the trip. Suddenly, they heard news that a group of people was heading to the city. When they went out to meet them, this group introduced themselves as envoys from the Free Cities Alliance located east of the continent. It seemed they had started approaching the Round Table Conference and inviting the entire conference to participate in a meeting of rulers next month. Shiro knew this had both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that they would gain more information and knowledge about the people of the land in this world, but the disadvantage was that they might get caught in the political games of the rulers. However, Shiro was not too worried about the disadvantages because the people of the land were weaker than the players, so they would still hold control. The next day, Marie's group set out for training. On the journey, they enjoyed sights they had never seen before. They decided to rest at an abandoned school and that night held a BBQ party. Unfortunately, Shiro could not join because he had to attend a prior meeting where the conference members elected 1 person from the Fighter Guild and 1 from the Merchant Guild to attend the meeting. However, they still needed someone strong in politics and negotiations. All eyes turned in one direction, so Shiro could not avoid it. He went along with his brother, who wore black armor and was insensitive from the Merchant Guild. Akatsuki always followed Shiro, and Henry also joined. Although Henry claimed to join to learn, Shiro knew she followed because of Akatsuki. Shiro knew that the people of the land would undergo significant changes. Previously, when the people of the land were just programmed characters, they could complete missions for them and receive valuable rewards such as magic bags. However, now, with the game's changes, new players who did not yet have magic bags would never have them. After strolling around the city, Marie's group finally reached the beach they had been eagerly waiting for. They immediately ran into the sea to soak. Meanwhile, Shiro's group arrived at the Ice Palace, said to have been built by an ancient race. That night, a dance party and meeting were held. Everyone felt quite tense. Akatsuki felt uncomfortable in party clothes, but Henry kept praising her. The reason was the clothes could not hide weapons. The Alliance leader approached them, and the brother in black armor introduced himself as Krusty. He had a noble aura, making Shiro feel a bit more at ease. While Krusty discussed with the king, Shiro and Henry realized that the nobles were reluctant to approach them because neither side had information about the other. Both sides wanted to obtain information from the other but did not want to provide information about themselves. The king then introduced his niece to everyone. She was Lessa. On Marie's side, Sugu announced that the next day they would enter a dungeon for an exam. Everyone was excited until they heard that only they would enter without a coach, which made their faces change. Meanwhile, Shiro's group observed the nobles who were dancing. The king wanted them to dance one song because everyone was watching them. If they did not dance, it would embarrass the round table conference, but if they danced, they would embarrass themselves. Krusty wanted to discuss some matters with the king, so Shiro had to dance. Fortunately, Henry joined as a dance partner. Henry knew Shiro could not dance, so she guided him. Henry, with her character class as a supporter with a voice, only needed to give a rhythm for Shiro to follow. They managed to draw all the attention on the dance floor. The children accidentally bumped into Akatsuki, thinking she was a child too, and invited her to play hide and seek, causing her to disappear and leave only her clothes behind. After that, Shiro could rest, and Minori called him. Minori was worried about the journey to the dungeon the next day because she feared being a burden to everyone. However, the next morning, Shiro's group was enjoying breakfast, and Shiro vowed to take revenge on those who had pushed him to dance. Akatsuki thought Shiro was being childish, but Shiro realized that Akatsuki seemed angry, so he shifted his attention back to the main issue. Shiro wanted to know if this group had a chef because it seemed that this castle would need more help, as he believed that the noble training would still continue with the entire Land Alliance, which amounted to about 30,000 people. And with 20,000 of their players on the same side, the land would surely be worried about them. The purpose of this meeting was to see if the players had any specific ambitions and plans, but the dance party last night had wiped those thoughts from their minds. Shiro dared to swear that the people of the Great Land were thinking like this. Before the Great Disaster, they only needed to pay the players, and the players would not disturb them. But since that day, the number of players running missions has decreased, and now they are forming ruling organizations like they did and developing very quickly, so they must immediately bring the Round Table Conference to their side. Clearly, they would not want to be their subordinates, so they would try to negotiate and bribe individuals or small guilds from the players' side. How to prevent this from happening and ensure Shiro's thoughts are correct? Akatsuki is the person Shiro needs to scout. At that time, the group that was training had arrived at the dungeon, and Nyan showed the way to the beginner dungeon and told them to know their limits before entering the intermediate path. After dividing the team, the two twin brothers went with the little girl Sira, another girl named Isuzu, and a delusional young man named Judy. This young man had a low level but often boasted and somehow still managed to be friends with Tojiya. Minori wanted to plan but couldn't get into the conversation, feeling increasingly insecure. Before entering, Nyan and Sugu gave advice and encouragement to them. After entering, Rudy was asked to use magic to create light so they could see the way in this dark cave. Sira also managed to do it, making the young man feel that his light was weaker, but since the brighter the better, he ignored it. They then arrived at a crossroads, with the previous group having entered the intermediate path, so they took the other path. Minori wanted to make sure the path was correct because she was a magician, but she thought the closer her position, the faster her magic would fly. So, Minji could only comfort herself by helping in time. The whole group then encountered 3 skeletons. Tojiya attacked first to attract the monster's attention, but the excessive attack injured him, so Minori had to heal just as the monster attacked. Sira used healing magic again, and Rudy used magic to deal with the rest. Isuzu strengthened Rudy to shoot magic again, making them work quite well together. Suddenly, Rudy managed to dodge an arrow shot by one of the skeleton archers. Tojiya, who was too excited, attacked and got caught by 5 skeletons that suddenly appeared. Minori wanted to use protective magic but was not fast enough. Suddenly, the skeletons switched to attacking Judy, quickly depleting his blood. They had no choice but to flee. Meanwhile, Krusty was discussing with an official when he saw Princess Lessa, so he postponed his work to meet the princess. That night, Krusty told Shiro's group that he no longer had to worry about being invited to the troublesome noble parties because he had a strong shield. Shiro didn't understand what he meant by that shield. The princess told her servant about Krusty. When Krusty met the princess, she found Krusty quite troublesome, but it was as if Krusty could read her mind. Krusty said that he didn't like noble tea parties, so he chose to get acquainted with the princess as an excuse to avoid the parties. Her servant suggested the princess not get too close to Krusty because he was an adventurer, and they had no information about them. The next morning, the princess saw Krusty helping the soldiers train. He explained that he wanted to understand the people of the Great Land better, but the princess knew he was investigating their strength. Krusty deliberately spoke loudly so that the soldiers gathered and proposed a match, with the strongest winner accompanying the princess. Everyone was excited to hear that. Shiro, who was passing by, finally understood what Krusty's shield meant. Akatsuki, while investigating the nobles, was hindered by children who found her, forcing her to hide again. Shiro also faced difficulties in his private conference because everyone had high egos and didn't want to listen to each other's opinions. Minori called for further advice, but he was very busy. Krusty had defeated all the soldiers, and the princess was not surprised at all. Krusty then went with the princess, lay on a chair to rest, and suggested the princess try sitting relaxed. He told the princess that adventurers were completely free, and to achieve that freedom, they had to have determination. The group of children practiced repeatedly but still lost, even though the monsters they fought were of lower levels. Rudy blamed everyone in the back line. Minji wanted to speak, but couldn't get into the conversation. The trainers outside were not worried the children would have problems because if they died, they would be resurrected in the city. Sugu would drive to pick them up and bring crabs, but Nyan only liked small crabs because large crabs tasted bland. Suddenly, Marie saw waves in the distance that quickly disappeared. At that time, the insensitive brother was negotiating with a noble. They appreciated the adventurers' efforts to find ways to cook food that made the region richer, but there were problems in delivery because of monsters. They needed the adventurers to eradicate the monsters, but they needed sea shipping technology. Krusty and the princess attended a social event. Krusty only talked with the princess. Suddenly, two girls approached them and wanted to speak to Krusty. He took the two girls and the princess outside. The two girls praised Krusty, but he only downplayed it. The princess felt annoyed but agreed to let the two girls go quickly. After they left, Krusty told the princess that he approached her because he had a younger sister who resembled the princess, so he wanted to be with the princess to reduce his fatigue. The princess accepted the reason and offered her hand to Krusty, thinking he would kiss it, but Krusty just shook hands in a normal way. Shiro met Akatsuki to ask about the investigation results. It was found that the nobles were still wary of them, but most of the nobles half disliked them and the other half wanted to attract them to their side. Suddenly, a magician named Regan approached them and took them to his private library. Regan knew about the magic bag and how to get it. Meanwhile, the young adventurers planned to secretly enter the dungeon again, but Sugu forbade it because they had to keep and respect the rules. Regan told Shiro about the investigation of world-level magic usage, which had many levels, and world-level magic was the highest, capable of changing civilization. In the past, this world was inhabited by various races, but races that were strong in the military were weak in reproduction and eventually conquered by humans. They summoned 6 goddesses of vengeance, and world-level magic was used for the first time. Although the goddesses were quickly defeated by humans, they managed to cause damage by creating goblins and monsters that kept appearing. World-level magic was activated again to summon adventurers to this world more than 200 years ago, and Shiro, who had been known in the game for almost 100 years, realized that time in the game ran 12 times faster than in the real world, so nearly 100 years was equivalent to 8 years since he started playing the game. 20 years ago, Shiro entered this world when the game officially launched. He wanted to investigate further because, according to Regan, both humans and players here possess an energy called a soul. This soul directly affects the player's memories, so each time they die and are revived, they lose some memories. At that time, the group of children decided to re-enter the dungeon, but suddenly Minori realized something. Toya felt the same. Minori, still scared, slapped her face to boost her courage and stood up. She proposed that they wait until the afternoon before entering again. She reasoned that they could get to know each other better, as despite being together for 3 days, Minori felt she didn't know much about them. Rudy then demonstrated his ability, creating a very powerful magic orb. Toya introduced his enemy provocation skill, though its range was short. He wanted to wait until he could attract many enemies before launching an attack. Isuzu revealed a new ability to reduce damage. That day, they spent time getting to know each other better. The next day, they returned to the dungeon and worked together as planned. Toya led by attracting the enemy's attention, followed by Isuzu and Rudy attacking, while Sira observed from a safe spot for healing and Minori kept watch. They successfully won through good teamwork. Meanwhile, Henry noticed that Shiro seemed tired from continuously working. She wanted Shiro to rest, but Shiro was thinking about the information from Ran about this world and whether they would forget the real world if they died too often here. Suddenly, Minori called, and Shiro realized that the group of children had understood and overcome their issues. Shiro decided to move forward with a feeling of happiness similar to Minori. Isuzu then admitted her feelings towards Rudy, realizing that her attraction was because Rudy reminded her of a small dog, not a romantic interest. The next morning, Sujiro's team rushed to the beach after hearing about a monster attack. Although the monsters were low level, their numbers were vast. Sujiro and his team were surrounded by a swarm of fish, while Sugu couldn't help as he was fighting goblins. Nyan, patrolling in the air, reported that more goblins were coming. In the Ice Palace, Shiro was informed about the thousands of goblins approaching. Meanwhile, Marie and Sugu's groups rejoined. They found out that the goblins were targeting a small town without defensive walls, and it would be destroyed overnight. However, these goblins were just a medium-sized group that split off to loot, so they could still be stopped. Minori wanted to help, even though Isuzu felt they were still weak. Minori proposed a plan to attack the goblins before they reached the town. Sugu agreed with the plan, although Marie was worried. After hearing the plan, Shiro held an emergency meeting with the nobles, but they couldn't reach an agreement yet. The group of children then encountered some goblins and managed to defeat them with good teamwork. Shiro realized that the nobles would ask for their help, but they couldn't assist without a proper plan. An easy way would be to divide some roles for them to act. At that moment, the princess overheard some officials talking about seeking help from the adventurers. However, this would mean they would owe the adventurers and would have to avoid exposing their weaknesses. They also didn't want to reveal that the night forces had disappeared. The princess then went to meet Krusty. She thought he should be sleeping now, but despite being considered lazy, he still had to look after the children who were currently preparing for the next wave. Judy seemed happy with the new gloves they got during their recent trip to the dungeon. It only enhanced the mage's power, so the whole group gave it to Judy. It was the result of the group's collective effort, so Judy appreciated it very much. 3 representatives from the Round Table Council had been invited to meet with the landlords. Shiro knew that the other party was waiting for them to speak first, so Shiro stood up and directly asked where the night forces were currently located. Wanting to hide it, they spoke vaguely and asked the adventurers to solve this problem. A landlord whose territory was being attacked stated that the adventurers' power was given by the gods, so they should be responsible for protecting this continent. Merchant sibling Michai, angry, slammed the table, saying they were not obligated to help this alliance because they were not its members. The other landlords didn't intend to force them to fight but wondered if the adventurers would stand by and do nothing while the continent was in danger. Michai said they were not animals to be commanded by the landlords. They could indeed be immortal, but adventurers also faced the risk of losing their memories. Michai's overreaction left Krusty confused about what to do, but the princess entered and asked Krusty for permission to go to their city. She wanted to gather volunteer soldiers, and in return, she would tell them about the disappearance of the night forces. The landlords were angry at her actions, but the king ignored them and asked her to continue. He acknowledged that humans were weak compared to adventurers, but they had no right to use their weakness to force adventurers as tools. He knew that adventurers were free people, so he would ask for help from those willing to assist. The princess then became exhausted, and Krusty caught her. Shiro decided to hand over the command to Krusty. Krusty then took the princess back to the city. Shiro realized that the princess had done something no one else could do, and it seemed that the situation there would change thanks to her, the shy princess. The princess was then fascinated by the bustling place. Krusty had to return to the meeting briefly, so Shiro and Akatsuki would escort her. She didn't know where to start, so Shiro would help her. Michai at the castle seemed desperate, not knowing what to do. She saw Sojo, who had just arrived, surrounded by women, making Sojo's subordinates jealous, but they had to restrain themselves because it was work. Shiro then took the princess around the city and brought her to get a beautiful dress made. The children approached the princess and invited her to eat burgers. Everyone was happy because she looked like a princess from their imagination. Shiro then returned with the dress and asked Akatsuki to help the princess change her clothes. Once done, Shiro brought the princess to meet everyone. Shiro gathered them and announced that the princess's alliance was under attack and they would surely easily overcome the goblins, but the problem was they wouldn't get a reward for this. So if anyone didn't want to participate, they could stay home and ignore the alliance. However, he still wanted the princess to convince them herself. The princess wore the dress and looked stunning. She introduced herself and acknowledged that her country was in danger and the night forces had disappeared. She apologized for their council's intention to force them to fight just because they were immortal. This place was too prosperous, so she didn't know what reward to give. She admitted that she was lazy and shy, nothing more than a vase, but as a princess, she had to take responsibility for protecting her homeland. Everyone felt her sincerity, so they agreed to help her. They were waiting for a big event like this to fill their time, so Krusty decided to be the commander and Shiro the chief of staff. They would prepare in 15 minutes, so get ready. The next morning, Shiro wanted them to quickly defeat the goblins because no one knew where the goblins would attack after destroying the alliance. The steamship being completed by the Merchants Guild must be used soon. Krusty will take people on the ship first, while Shiro will lead people to camp in an area as a reserve force. He reported to Michai to monitor the behavior of the landlords on the other side. Henry came to report that the king wanted to meet Michai. The king first mentioned that the landlords were divided because of the actions of the princess, partly because they thought she was secretly colluding with the adventurers. But now, the most worrying issue is the security of his territory. The king apologized for the rude actions of the landlords and their intention to exploit the adventurers. He now understands that the adventurers have power equal to his alliance, so he wants to make a peace treaty with them. However, Henry and Michai did not want to decide on this and handed it over to Shiro. The princess is currently on the ship, worried about the chaos she created, and embarrassed the king before running away. Krusty knew she wanted to fix things, but even though he knew her actions were shameful, he did not regret it because she had asked for their strength, so he felt responsible for joining the fight. There have been many new things for her since she left the Alliance, so she feels like a bird in a cage. She has no political ability or military value, she knows her value is almost nothing, but she still wants to protect the freedom of the adventurers. Krusty was about to say something, but his men called him to get ready, so he promised to meet the princess later. At that moment, Marie's group had joined Sugu's group. They managed to protect the city, and Marie was still surprised that the Earthians were very similar to humans. Shiro was the one who realized and reminded them of this. Krusty then stood up to explain the plan to everyone. His men told the princess that Krusty was one of the 20 best commanders among the adventurers. They will also place people to protect the princess, so please don't do anything foolish. Marie's group is currently discussing the battle Krusty will face with the goblins. Krusty's success or failure will affect the security of this place. Suddenly, Minori approached Sira to ask for help. That night, Krusty began to meet with the large goblin forces. The wizards launched the first attack to reduce their numbers, then Krusty led the troops forward. Each goblin only needed one strike to be finished. Krusty's techniques also managed to defeat a large number of enemies. 2 large monsters with fairly high levels attacked him, but Krusty quickly dodged and countered them with one strike. The princess saw Krusty fighting with Spirit, but he seemed a bit lonely. Shiro's logistics team is currently observing the situation and directing the small teams. This logistics team will help the small teams communicate with each other through telepathic connections, making it easier to fight and understand. The situation was improving, so Shiro wanted to also pay attention to Marie's group because if Krusty's forces drove out the goblins, they would surely spread and attack small villages. They need to gather the goblins into one area. Marie's forces are currently stationed in a city near the coast, so they also need to be wary of sea monsters that might invade and pass through Marie to break the siege they built to stop the goblins. Shiro has not been able to go down to the battlefield because he has not fully mastered the situation. On Marie's side, the twin couple is currently patrolling and finds a big wave coming. Marie's group immediately runs there and finds many monsters following. Marie did not want the children to go down to the battlefield, but everyone asked for permission to fight. Sugu also persuaded Marie to agree. On Marie's side, the news of this had been conveyed to Shiro. The trainers currently cannot go down to the battlefield because they have to wait for full energy recovery. Nyan observed the group of children fighting and saw that all had shown progress. Togia had become stronger, Shiro was no longer hindered by recovery and could summon help to fight. Isuzu and Judy worked together very well to produce attacks that, although using few resources, gave maximum results. Rudy became a moving torch, while Minori observed and strategized for the whole team. It seemed she fought like a second Shiro. Shiro could see the battlefield 30 seconds ahead with only a 1-second error. It seemed Minji was chasing Shiro's shadow, and they wondered how many seconds she could predict. Suddenly, an alarm sounded, announcing that the goblins had returned, so the whole group immediately moved there and let the trainers finish the rest. Sugu knew they were at risk, but Minori asked them to trust this group of children. The group then saw a fairly large number of goblins, but they just needed to gather them together. Judy cast lightning to attract their attention, Isuzu slowed them down, and the group used all the attacks they could. After completing their task, Minori reported that she could predict 5 seconds with a 5-second error. Currently, she could not be like Shiro, but she kept trying. An alarm sounded elsewhere, so the group had to keep moving. Shiro told Marie to hold on for another hour because help was coming. Minori's group was almost out of energy and did not know how much longer they could hold on. Hearing that help was coming, they held on. Suddenly, it rained, and goblins and wolves attacked. The goblins could be faced, but the wolves were faster and more dangerous, so Minori had to use an ultimate attack that needed a day's recovery to protect her sister. 2 wolves and 1 high-level goblin attacked Togia, and they were sure to lose. Minori asked Togia to buy time with the high-level goblin and 1 wolf, while the Rudy pair handled the other. Shiro taught the girl that when facing many difficult enemies, the weak must be killed first to reduce the damage they could cause. But before they could act, Togia was hit. Sira tried to heal, but it needed 8 more seconds for Minori to recover the shield. However, she knew the shield was not enough to withstand all the damage, so Rai decided to lure the wolves to follow her. After successfully diverting 2 wolves, she bit the wolf and blew up her hand shield. The group then looked for a way to use a revival spell for Judy, but Judy could not wake up. Isuzu revealed that Judy was a great Earthian and she had known since they became friends, promising to keep it a secret. Judy always tried hard and hid this because she wanted to be an adventurer. Sira suddenly got the idea to try a healing spell, and somehow Judy responded, although very weakly. This gave them hope. Minji contacted Shiro to ask for help. Previously, Minji had never directly asked for help, only advice, but now she asked Shiro to save a friend. Shiro called Rasen to lead while he left. Shiro then summoned a bird to fly to Minori's position and check the situation. He asked Minji to report the situation, while Toji watched around for monsters. Sira and Isuzu alternated using revival and healing spells every 2 minutes, according to Shiro's advice, to keep Judy's soul from separating after death. According to Regan, there is a way to save a great Earthian if done immediately after death and the body has not separated. Shiro remembered Regan's world-level spell and asked Akatsuki to take control for a while. The princess was brought to meet Krusty, who was bathing, and she asked about the battlefield. It seemed she had many fans. Someone reported that a new wave of monsters had appeared, so Krusty was interested in fighting again. Shiro had finished his plan and heard the steamship was almost at the shore to support Marie's group. He landed and asked Akatsuki to ride the bird and block the area. Shiro arrived and checked the situation, warning the children not to tell anyone about what he was going to do. If they violated, he would leave them. Shiro then used the spell to absorb energy from the entire group and transfer it to Rai to save one person, requiring blood and energy restoration. With the energy already available, only a healing spell was needed, but to connect the energy and blood, Shiro used one more item that allowed Judy to live again for 3 minutes. Judy woke up and realized that he had died, asking everyone not to blame themselves because sacrifices in battle are common. However, Shiro argued that giving up too easily made a person unworthy of being called an adventurer, but he had a way to change that. Shiro produced a contract for Judy to become an official adventurer, an agreement for Judy to join the guild and adhere to all its rules and duties. In return, Judy would become a free human. Judy accepted the contract and wanted to sign it, but his hand couldn't, so Isuzu helped him. After the contract was signed, Judy's time ran out and he could be resurrected at the temple because he was now an adventurer. This was magic that changed the world's rules, conceived by Shiro, transforming a great Earthian into an adventurer. Meanwhile, Krusty's group encountered a group of goblins riding wolves, including the Goblin King they had to defeat. Krusty's group killed them one by one, even summoning a phoenix bird to help. Finally, the Goblin King was also defeated by Krusty and the rest was left to Shiro. Marie and Sugu could now rest after the exhausting battle. Both had done a good job, and Shiro now realized that adventurers were not just players like him, but companions who would venture together toward new horizons. The next morning, Judy woke up in the temple and met Isuzu again. She scolded Rudy for acting recklessly and not listening to her. Judy promised that from now on, she would listen to everything Isuzu said to avoid being scolded again. 1 month later, the entire Round Table Council and the Alliance of Free Cities held a celebration party. During the party, Krusty chatted with everyone and occasionally glanced at the princess, making people think they must have feelings for each other. He didn't understand why they hadn't fully dealt with the goblin problem. The Goblin King was not dead and was hiding in a cave. Nyan thought they didn't need to because both sides had now signed a peace contract, and adventurers were tasked with exterminating goblins. So, as long as the Goblin King was alive, goblins would remain a source of income for the adventurers. This plan had been devised by Shiro earlier. Isuzu had also asked for permission to join Shiro's guild. Henry was looking for Shiro but couldn't find him because he was the chief of staff who had to attend the party. After that, she continued to search for Shiro. Shiro was sitting with Akatsuki, working, but when he heard Henry's voice, he handed the work to Akatsuki and left first. As he left, he heard the news about the Demon Festival and immediately departed before the other adventurers. Adventurers were currently boasting about their achievements. Nyan and Sugu knew that death caused memory loss, but this was not told to everyone, only key members of the Round Table Council knew. At that time, Gyro walked past a girl telling stories to children. He listened to the story. The girl talked about brave warriors stronger than knights with eternal abilities. They helped great humans fight and defeat many strong monsters. Shiro thought the girl was telling a story about adventurers, so he continued walking. Suddenly, the girl reached the part where an adventurer died because he was a great human. The wizards couldn't revive that person, so they sought help from a grand wizard. The Grand Wizard created world-class magic to revive the great human into a hero like them. Shiro realized this story was about how he saved Jinan. He stopped, and the girl left. Shiro then sought out Regan to ask about this. Regan knew that a month earlier, Shiro had used world-class magic, and he also felt that thanks to Regan, he knew about this. Regan told him that a few days ago, he sensed someone in the west also using world-class magic. Shiro realized that the only place in the west he hadn't checked was the Minami region, where the demon festival he heard about was currently happening. That place was controlled by a guild, and he was informed that this demon festival was similar to the Goblin King event that occurred periodically, and knights were likely involved. After that, he left, and Henry found him and dragged him away. At the party, music was played, but no one dared to start dancing, so Krusty invited the princess to dance. The princess danced while remembering that her grandfather told her that asking adventurers for help was her idea, so she would be responsible for rewarding them. Her grandfather suggested establishing an embassy in the adventurer's city, and she would be the ambassador responsible for maintaining friendship between both parties. Krusty knew what she was thinking, so he told her that when she got there, she could realize her dream of relaxing without worrying about etiquette. The princess was happy but remained cautious because Krusty was a demon who could read her mind. Sierra also wanted to be with Nyan but was disappointed because she couldn't join Shiro's guild while still a member of Marie's. Nyan invited her to dance. Minori was looking for Shiro but heard some people speaking ill of him. They thought Shiro forced the princess to go to the battlefield and spread other false stories. Shiro didn't like being at the party, so he entered with Akatsuki. He saw Akatsuki looking pensive, so he told her that being by his side constantly was a great help. Seeing her still hesitant, he invited her to dance because he had seen her practicing dancing recently. Both were not good at dancing, so there was no need to worry about being laughed at. A few days later, the princess came to the adventurer's city. Regarding death-causing memory loss, Shiro only spread it as a rumor to avoid chaos. Autumn was approaching, so Marie had the idea to hold a festival and was confident because she had planned it. Soon after, the festival was approved and everyone started working. Many people made models of the princess to sell. Marie prepared many decorations, and her guild planned to make winter items for sale. Minori planned to invite Shiro to the next festival. Shiro was busy with his work when Henry came to see how he was working because she heard he hadn't left the house for several days. Henry suggested that Shiro take some time to go to the festival with his friends as a member of the Round Table Council. Shiro promised to arrange his work, so Henry left. Akatsuki then appeared with red bean cakes for Shiro to eat and wanted him to rest for a while. They both went out to eat the cakes, and Shiro felt it had been a long time since he had time to relax. Akatsuki wanted to invite him to the festival but hadn't had the chance to say it when Minori arrived first. Akatsuki and Minori fought over going with Shiro, so he had to think of a way to solve this problem. Minori then went to prepare something when Isuzu came. Minori wanted to be with Shiro in the cake eating contest. If they won, they had a chance to go to the royal party. Minji wanted more people to know Shiro because many misunderstood him and thought he was cunning when he was kind-hearted. Isuzu agreed to help Minori while Akatsuki felt angry because she was competing with a middle school student. Shiro promised to go with her and Minori, so she felt it was like a date. She was confused about what to wear, so she sought help. Henry sensed Akatsuki needed her, so she ran. Akatsuki suddenly felt a chill, so she decided to look for herself. Akatsuki then went to find Rasen and Minji to ask for help in choosing suitable clothes. Akatsuki had nice formal attire. Shiro praised them both for looking beautiful. When the cake seller brought out the cakes, they thought they could easily eat 4 cakes to win, but when they started eating, they realized they had to eat 4 large cakes. The food was delicious, but Shiro found it difficult to swallow because he felt pressured by the people behind him who kept cheering. Shiro felt more pressured than fighting 12 bosses at once. Eventually, Shiro went home with a stomach full of cake. He wanted to play more but had no energy. Minori told them to go home first while she bought tea to help Shiro's digestion. Even though they couldn't go to the royal party, it was still enjoyable. That night, Shiro thought about the cakes and felt a stomachache. He called Sujiro to tell him about the eating contest and wanted to know how much Sujiro could eat. Shiro felt envious because Sujiro was always surrounded by girls but still did his job well. He thought Nyan and Sugu could become good guild leaders. Suddenly, Akatsuki came and thought Shiro would hate cakes after the incident. They rarely talked, so they struggled to find a topic. Akatsuki touched Shiro's forehead because she felt comfortable. Minori came with tea and saw them, so she left the tea and went away. She felt sad because she realized Akatsuki also liked Shiro. She cried and said Shiro should be hers. At that moment, Toga came and they talked. She confessed her feelings to Toga, but Toga had known her for a long time. Everyone who knew Shiro liked him because he was very caring like a teacher. Of course, Togia still understood his brother's intentions. But nothing had happened between Shiro and Minji, so let everything proceed as usual. The next day, Shiro's group sat together to discuss what should be done because it was only the second day of the festival. The Minji siblings would play together, Isuzu would take the blonde-haired dog for a walk, Shiro thought he would be immersed in work again, while Sugu planned to be a food safety inspector. While eating, Sugu saw 2 young men arguing, so he mediated between them. Akatsuki noticed that Sugu was only eating, so she constantly teased him to mock him, making her angry and demanding compensation. Sugu gave Akatsuki a gift voucher so she could work. Each time they ate at a stall, they received a stamp. After the stamps were full, they received a gift. Sugu then teased Akatsuki again, so she hit him. Akatsuki then saw someone selling souvenirs, so she browsed around. Meanwhile, Minji went to Marie to ask for tickets to the party. She directed Minori to ask for the tickets and pick them up. Marie was hiding in a barrel, saying she was resting, but she was hiding from work and didn't want to be found by Henry. Akatsuki then bought a new hair clip and looked for Shiro to show it off, but he didn't notice and told her to go to Henry because there was work to be done, leaving her to work. Akatsuki got angry and threw the gift she got from the voucher at Shiro. Sugu realized that his voucher had been replaced, so he had an excuse to eat again. Minori then went to Raxin to offer help. Isuzu saw Minji trying to help Shiro regain his reputation because all the good reputations so far had been given to Krusty by Shiro, so he didn't receive any praise at all. Seeing big people arguing with adventurers, Judy came to help resolve the issue. Meanwhile, Henry found Marie exhausted and wanting a bath, so she called Sugu to help carry her things. Marie noticed Sugu, so she quickly took a bath to avoid embarrassment in front of him. Henry then realized that she was starting to like Shiro because he was the best person she had ever met. Akatsuki also met Henry, who told her that she needed help selling winter goods that afternoon. Meanwhile, the princess was organizing a social event. She felt deceived by Krusty because the place was not quiet at all. Krusty arrived but only saw her trying to organize the party. She just wanted to do something to thank the adventurers. The two sat drinking tea together while Minji showed her new profession to Raxin. She had asked Shiro for advice earlier and decided to leave the tailor profession and choose the apprentice profession. This profession allowed her to copy other people's skills, albeit at a lower level. She believed that with this apprentice profession, she could approach more people and gain a good reputation. Minji did her job well, impressing Raxin. Meanwhile, Nyan and Sira were eating when a man caused a commotion in the restaurant, nearly starting a fight. Nyan had to intervene and drive the man away, making Shaw admire her. Nyan told Shiro that the arrival of big people here was causing a lot of chaos for the adventurers. These big people, though divided into classes, were very professional, while the adventurers, though free, tended to be less professional. The Black Sword Association and Krusty were responsible for security, so they had to resolve many issues, mostly fights between players and big people. Shiro went to the market to see Marie's group stall. Akatsuki was trying on clothes for Henry when she met Shiro. She saw a commotion, so she went to check. The big person wanted to buy all the items at the stall, but the stall refused. The person tried to make a fuss, but Shiro came and drove him away. They opened the stall for work, not for business, so they didn't sell everything at once. Suddenly, Shiro realized something odd was happening around, mostly coming from big people. Minori also reported that there were many mistakes in the documents, mostly coming from big people. Shiro realized this issue and immediately asked Akatsuki to fetch the reports. He returned to the office to check. According to Shiro, the city was going to be attacked. He knew he had been careless and given the enemy an advantage. At the office, he realized that there had been many disturbances in the past 2 days. The enemy seemed to aim to damage the reputation of the Round Table Association. The princess heard that a noble from the west had arrived, so she had to welcome him. Members of the Black Sword Association reported to Shiro that the noble from the west had just arrived in the city. He suspected the big people were behind this damage, and based on the scale of the attack, their leader was an important figure. They couldn't stop the festival, so they had to find a way to minimize the losses. Shiro had a way to counterattack, but not with violence as Akatsuki thought. He then called Sugu for help with security because they had to resolve this issue quietly without attracting attention. Ji also went to Raxin to help. Minori continued to work as usual and followed Shiro's instructions. She felt more trusted by Shiro. The problems outside were too many to solve. Minori felt their task on the back line was not to let emotions interfere with their work. Seeing Minori work calmly made Raxin feel like Shiro was there. Shiro still couldn't understand the enemy's goal because it was too chaotic. Members of the Black Sword Association also stepped in to help. However, on Nyan's side, the chaos was worse because many big people were fighting, and they couldn't resolve the issues one by one. Couples were also fighting because of this chaos. Shiro and Nyan couldn't find a pattern in these attacks, from traffic jams to fights, bribes, and document errors. When Henry and Akatsuki reported 2 more incidents, Shiro realized that the enemy had no plan. They were just causing chaos everywhere without a clear goal. Shiro felt helpless, but if they didn't do something within an hour, the situation would get worse. Shiro was in a dilemma when Sojo came and thanked him for recommending the cake shop. They ate until the shop ran out of cake. Seeing Sojiro stay calm, Shiro found a way to handle this chaos. The noble arrived at the princess's party and began to overstep boundaries. He belittled the adventurers, calling them commoners. When someone approached, he threw them. He then touched the princess's hair and disrespected the prepared food. Shiro found a way to handle this problem by borrowing Sojo's team for security. The girls in Sojo's team had strong bonds, so they could work well together and resolve issues gently without causing further problems. This method proved effective because big people surrounded by girls tended not to cause damage. They also easily resolved conflicts between couples. Shiro then received news about the situation at the princess's place and immediately headed there, leaving the camp duties to Nyan. He asked Akatsuki to take care of the stage for the big fireworks. Shiro then went to the rescue. The princess was in trouble because of a marquis. The marquis complained about the goods he sent and had sent a letter to the princess to prepare a warehouse, But the warehouse was not ready. Minji and Krusty arrived shortly after, and the three informed that this mistake was the princess's negligence, so they would take responsibility because the letter was sent to them before reaching the princess. The Marquis was surprised because it seemed the letter had never been sent, but he stayed calm to continue his plan. Regarding the goods, Minji had already prepared a warehouse to store everything, so she told him to proceed with the delivery. Krusty indicated that they had discovered Marquis's evil plan, making him feel guilty and leave the place. Zero still needed the princess's help with some things, especially because Marie's group had organized a fashion show where everyone had a chance to perform. The princess and Krusty were the two main stars. They allowed the princess to sit in a special chair and let anyone talk to her, giving the princess's fans a chance to approach their idol. However, some people still saw Zero as a villain oppressing the princess. Minji came looking for Shiro and saw that everything was over, but he was unsure if Marquis was the mastermind behind all of this. Minji asked Zero if he deliberately made the princess hate him. He admitted it because he needed someone close to the princess and someone to hate. He needed this for his plans. However, he understood that Minori was worried that if people hated him, they would also hate the entire guild. He could handle that, but Minori's concern was about Zero's feelings when he was hated. He had never thought about that before. However, he also thanked Minori for working hard. He used to like acting alone and becoming strong on his own, but now he understood that he needed people around him in the world to showcase his talents. He also saw Minji as someone he wanted to emulate, someone extroverted and friendly with everyone. Akatsuki overheard their conversation and left. She had never understood the meaning of Zero's actions. Even though she was always by Zero's side, she couldn't comprehend the things Minori said that night. Zero then met someone to get information about the western region, but the person he met was the one who told the children in the ice castle about him. He knew the woman was Nua. Nua immediately revealed herself, and according to Zero, she was the guild leader who controlled the entire western region. When the great disaster occurred, she went west and gained support from the nobles there, then used her power to buy the Temple of God, which could control the lives of adventurers, forcing everyone to submit to her guild. She also knew about Zero and that he had performed world magic. However, Zero also knew that she planned to reactivate the intercity teleportation portal. The reason she sought Shiro was to recruit him under her leadership. Zero knew that the Marquis's attack this time was also controlled by her from behind. Although she did not reveal the truth, if she was willing to, Shiro would consider the offer. She revealed that she once had a meaningless life, but when she found this game, she met someone who gave her motivation and a desire to conquer. Zero realized who the person she met was, but he ignored it before Shiro could remember more. She wanted Shiro to join her because she knew Shiro had found a way to help adventurers return to the real world. Although it was just an idea, she believed that if Zero cooperated with her, they could truly find the way. She knew that Shiro had no special reason to help the residents here, so she wanted to become the reason for Shiro. However, Shiro remembered his friends and realized that he already had his reasons. He did not want to become an ally but preferred to be an enemy to fulfill his desires. He hadn't remembered who the woman was, but he was sure he shouldn't follow her. However, he left the place believing that one day Shiro would be on his side. The next day, everyone started cleaning up the festival, but Marie's group still had many plans for other events. Minji couldn't believe that all this fun started just from a burger with a unique taste. That night, Zero's group gathered together. Nyan wanted Zero to often give instructions like a real guild leader. Everyone wanted to help Zero as much as possible, but they needed to prioritize leveling up first. Zero had set goals they had to achieve, not to make this continent stronger or return to the real world. But the real goal was to change this new world that had changed their reality. And the anime ended here.